Automobile after-sales service startup Gomechanics is in the crosshairs after co-founder Amit Bhasin in a LinkedIn post admitted to errors in financial reporting. Such grave errors that it has led to a lot of their funding being withdrawn and they've had to sack 70% of their workforce. Now, today on the show, we're going to be talking about what exactly went off with Gomechanics, what went wrong with them, and what are the allegations that they are facing. But it's also about a larger story. We're seeing a layoff spree in startups, especially in India, which have been growing over the last couple of months. We've already seen quite a few in 2023, number of companies which have laid off people. Some of these layoffs are because of, well, a bad business situation, but others are also linked to financial irregularities. And financial irregularities, how companies, especially startups, are looking at their own valuations is becoming a question mark more and more. So before we get to all of that, let me go across to my colleague Sharad Dubey, who's first outlining what the whole Gomechanics story is.
Well, yes, Gomechanics founders have come out with a controversial statement in LinkedIn, and they have stated that the financial irregularities is being plagued in the company itself. Now, they have also stated that they will be firing almost 70% of the workforce in the name of the company's restructuring. Apart from this, they have stated that they will initiate a forensic audit, and till then, the founders will be on leave until the report is submitted. But the important news also comes in, is reports are coming in, is that SoftBank and Malaysia's sovereign fund have actually backed out for the next round of funding, and this is because of reasons of valuations mismatch. Even E&Y came up with its due diligence report, and they have stated that there are certain discrepancies coming in because of fictitious garages and also showing fake and false numbers, especially in the user and the revenue growth metrics. Apart from these, the shareholders, if we see, it's Secure back. Apart from this, Aureus Ventures, Tiger Global and Chiratai Ventures also have stake in the company itself. Now let's look at the numbers where the company's valuations were there. The company is currently valued at almost $283 million, while the revenue stood at almost $11.4 million. Now they have also stated that they have raised around $62 million. But then one more thing is something which you want to ponder upon, is this the fourth time Secure has come under the scanner, and this is because this is the fourth startup, basically you can say, which has come under the financial due diligence stress, and irregularities have been reported. The startups include BharatPe, Zilingo, Trell, and now Gomechanics.
You know, financial irregularities, that's the key word. Of course, one of the results of this is that they've had to let go of a lot of people. They couldn't raise more funding, etc. But what's concerning is the kind of augmentation of valuations or misleading of financial status. And I'm speaking more about this today with Aditya Narayan Mishra, Director and CEO of SEAL HR Services. Shantanu Rooj is joining me today. He's founder and CEO of TeamLease EdTech and also senior entrepreneur. And Digvijay Mishra, Deputy Editor of ET Tech, is joining us. He's been covering this entire story very, very closely. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for speaking with us on the India Development Debate. Digvijay, let me actually begin with your take on the Gomechanics story. What would prompt Mr. Bhasin, the founder, to come out with all of these details in his LinkedIn post? Because what he has said in his LinkedIn post seems to be quite self-incriminatory. I'm talking about, when he says specifically, we followed growth at all costs, particularly in regard to financial reporting. What does it mean when you use financial reporting as a tool to follow growth? It sounds like you've inflated your numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very sophisticated way to put it. Put it like that. That they were following growth at all cost, but chasing growth at all cost doesn't mean you inflate revenues and show fictitious garages. And I think while the LinkedIn post came yesterday, it was in the making at least for over a couple of months. It all started with the EY audit that was mandated by SoftBank and Khazana for their potential investment that they were looking to do. And they found many glaring sort of loopholes there, which kind of led them to ask more questions to the founders, and they couldn't answer that. And after a lot of back and forth, eventually they realized that this deal is not going to go through, and they're running out of cash. They don't have really other options, and they went to the investors and actually confessed. And after a couple of days of the confession, only then the LinkedIn post came yesterday. So that's how it kind of unfolded.
I'm sorry, I'm going to say this as quite bluntly. This
Yeah,
confession seems to be incriminating yourself in what would be considered criminal acts if you were a public listed company. You're making up stuff, basically.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And you've had to confess to your founders. My point is, why this is not like you stole an extra cookie from the cookie jar, right? This is
Right.
big. You made up facts. What would be the consequences of something like this, Digvijay? Where does the story go from here? Because the people who seem to be losing out are people who signed up to work for your company.
Yeah. No, of course. I think everyone wants to know what happens to the founders, because it is not something light. It is not burning a few $1 million extra to hit internal growth numbers. This is basically as good as fraud. So, but I think what exactly happens, what action do the shareholders take? It'll all depend on the EY forensic report that is expected to be submitted in the coming weeks. I think only once that comes, existing investors like Sequoia, Tiger Global, Orias, Chirate Ventures, they can take a call on what the company wants to do against the founders. Because remember, like the audit report that EY did for SoftBank and Khazana, that has not been shared with the other investors. So right now, investors are also trying to figure out and are waiting that the EY forensic report comes sooner than later, and based on that, they will take action.
Yeah, the statement from the investors are that they're shocked and they're figuring out what to do next. But I want to
Yes.
understand how something like this would be pulled off. Shantanu Ruj, one would assume that when you have world-class global investors investing in your company, there would be a due diligence, there would be, regular checks on whether what you're claiming is bearing out. How does this process work, and why is this happening more and more? I mean, the idea of this discussion today is not to target X, Y, or Z company, but it just seems, confounding that any company could get away with this, or any set of founders could get away with this.
Yeah. So Tamanna, you're right. Actually, so this is definitely a lapse of governance and short-sightedness on the part of the promoters. Sometimes you have seen that promoters do some sort of this financial irregularity where they inflate revenues, hide costs, or hide debts, or the stuff that people have been doing. And obviously, it catches up with you in the long term. And when in the startup community, we call them that when you actually give birth to an organization or a company, you decide that whether you want to, it's a dwarf or a baby, right? So a dwarf and the baby at the small size looks the same. They eat the same amount of food, but then the dwarf is going to stay where it is and the baby is going to grow. So these are governance is so important when you want to actually create a large organizations. Lapse and that space, I think, is something that's showing up in some of the startups at this point in time. And that's coming up now at the forefront because of the funding winter, that there's a realization that raising the next round of capital is going to be difficult. There's going to be more amount of due diligence on top of it. There's more surveillance and there's more inspection on top of it. It's not going to be so much easier. The funds are becoming more careful about who they fund and when do they fund. They want to ensure that the burn style of businesses are going away. People need to run sustainable, long-term, profitable businesses. I think some sort of short-sightedness and lapse of governance leads to all these things.
You're linking it, Shantanu, just a follow-up question there, the additional due diligence or the more diligent due diligence because of the funding winter. But they seem like essential factors of any kind of due diligence. Do you really, for example, have as many garages as you are saying you do? Do you have a revenue model which actually works and is rooted in reality? These seem like very basic things. From what I'm understanding, were all of these things not being checked before? And now, because there is a quote-unquote funding winter, people are looking more closely?
I think I tend to agree with you here, Tamanna, that the rigor is now showing up at this point in time. A few quarters back, in the rush of funding for venture capitalists, we have seen the format of herd mentality, where people would go behind already funded companies. They're willing to fund companies who would run business at the current scale that you spoke about some time back, about 200 million valuation for $10 million type of a revenue. Rationale seems to be lacking in some of these investment decisions. And there was a rush for investing companies, and there was a rush of FOMO in this particular space of missing out large opportunities, which all of these got created during this wave of COVID digitalization, right? So the level of due diligence that was happening, I'm sure there were lapses there. I mean, this couldn't have happened over the last 2 quarters only. Whatever is showing up at this point in time must have been there for the last so many quarters, which got overlooked.
It's interesting how a funding winter brings everyone back to basics. Now everyone's talking about survival. Profit has become the buzzword again in this space. Aditya Mishra, are you linking this to the wave of startup layoffs that we've been seeing? It started in about, I think, November, December. It's been deepening. Vijay has been reporting on them a lot as well, and I'll come back to him for more details on that. But how do you see this panning out for employees in these companies and for hiring trends in these spaces?
Yeah, what we are seeing in the startup ecosystem, also in the big tech big tech companies, has been quite unfortunate, and there was such a huge attraction towards this particular sector over the last 2 years, in particular. And currently, it is completely the mood is quite different right now. Of course, these are largely due to the global factors. And I tend to agree with Shantanu when he says that in the COVID period of time, there was over ambitiousness and possibly a kind of an overestimation on the part of the founders as well as on the part of the investors that the whole world is going digital and people are not going to come back to the offline mode of shopping, offline mode of education and governance, governments, offices, all of it. Everybody thought that the whole world has become digital. And hence, the estimation of revenues, estimation of the future looked extremely colorful, and the the valuation of companies were really very high. And that is why this whole sector, one leads to the other. There was a kind of a virtuous cycle of sorts where the candidates or employees thought that startup is the future, only future, that we have to be there, and people were getting 100%, 200% kind of salary hikes. Where companies were struggling to retain the talent, many companies were struggling to attract talent. So all that has changed right now. While our study shows that there is still, the sector hasn't lost its luster. Our estimate is that the layoffs, whatever various media has reported various kind of numbers, but they are like still maybe about 3% of the overall workforce. So still 97% are working. So I will not really press the panic button. However, it is important to note that unrealistic things don't stick for a long time. They will fall off.
At one point, this was called a bubble. The way to describe this was called a bubble. What you're describing is exactly this. What you and Shantanu are describing is exactly this. When there is an inflow of large amount of funds because of a frenzied situation, and then reality sort of sinks in. But not to mix the two issues up, because one is about, I would say, over optimism, or optimism depending on those circumstances, which then changes. And the other is about, as Digvijay said, fraud, and coming back to massaging the truth when it comes to what your company is really up to. And it's the latter I want to ask you about, Digvijay, where as you're tracking all of these companies very, very closely. There are a few examples we spoke about in our report earlier for Sequoia-backed companies. Is this going to be something that VCs and those who are putting their money into this are going to look at very, very closely? That are the founders telling the truth?
Yeah, I think definitely for the time being, Yes, because already I think a lot of investors are who are known to do shorter DDs, they are taking longer, and obviously with capital becoming harder to sort of come by, pretty much all the deals are taking much longer, and investors and their operators are taking a closer look on all these metrics that founders are claiming in their decks. Even right now, there are many decks out there which where there is a lot of murmurs that some of the numbers might not be right. So definitely, all of this has led to a closer scrutiny being there for any startup looking to raise.
Tell us about the kind of layoffs you're also seeing and reporting. Digvijay, Aditya just said that it's still 3% of the total workforce, so no need to press the panic button. But why are we seeing so many reports coming in such quick succession? Is this sort of a lot of founders prepping for tough times ahead?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? Like what happened, say, for example, in Dunzo, it was still 3% for now. So that seems small, about less than 100 folks. But I think ShareChat has been one of the biggest layoffs. I think 500 people now, and more than 500 actually, and then 100 people in December. Uh, from what I can figure out is companies are also cutting costs across other departments in the company. But I think everyone kind of overestimated for growth during COVID, and that has kind of stalled definitely in India as well as in America. We are seeing Amazon has had to also fire because overall e-commerce growth has slowed down. So I think it's a bunch of these reasons, as well as the fact that they know that any growth stage company is going to take much longer to raise a new round of capital. We are seeing companies alternatively tapping convertible notes or some structured debt to get some money in the company. So while they are doing that, they also have to show investors that they are cutting on cost as much as possible, which is exactly why is kind of leading to all these job cuts. But my sense is that this is not the last of it, and it will maybe we'll see some more cuts in the coming months.
Yeah. Aditya, from the point of view of the employer, how would you gauge the financial health of your company? If your company wants to, raise funds and wants a new funding round, needs to look sharper, leaner, you don't want you to be on the chopping block to make their numbers look better. Let's look at it from the individual point of view. How do you gauge the health of your company, and what would you advise people who are in this space right now?
I think, firstly, I will say that it's the value system that the company operates with. Particularly the senior hires, they need to really look at who they are going to work with, what they believe in, have long conversations with them to kind of tap into their mind, their beliefs, whether how strong they are about their ethical standards, moral standards. What they are stating is sort of bravado, or it is believable. So that's one thing that we always will advise. The second one is to think that the unrealistic stuff, uh, how far that you can true that you can believe that it will hold waters. Of course, nobody knew one Amazon will become such a big entity globally. When Amazon would have started, it would have faced so many challenges. I understand that. However, there are many unrealistic claims people make that we are going to change this world. Is that really realistic? If one believes in it, in that dream, one should dive into it and be ready for these high risk and high reward games. We need to be aware of it. So this is the second thing, that what is your risk taking ability, that this is a high risk and high reward game.
Right.
Are you ready for it or not? So these two are very important things in my mind, Tamanna.
Right. So if you're looking for a steady sarkari type job, this is not where perhaps you should venture. Shantanu, what according to you are the red flags that stakeholders should look out for? Employees, partners, um,
So
people putting in their money,
So,
investors.
Tamanna, I mean, we have always believed that there are two things which are non-compromisable: governance and financial discipline. Startups and entrepreneurs must understand that shareholders do not pay your salaries, customers do. As the metrics are changing in today's world, from eyeballs, number of registered users, downloads, visitors, and stuff like that, to real metrics, which is cash flows, profits, right? Then there is actually a reality check on a lot of entrepreneurs at this point in time. I think it's important for entrepreneurs as well as for the investors to look at those metrics which are real, which are sustainable, which are long term, right? From an employee perspective, I think they will still get gone for some time unless, in case entrepreneurs as well as investors do not tell them the real story. But then, from an employee perspective, I would be careful about the background of the entrepreneur, in case they're first-time entrepreneurs, or the history of these people, whatever they've done in the past. I think that's something that's important. And it's to ensure that I join a company which is, it's not important small or large, but I need to join a company which is growing in real sense of revenues, profitability, and return on shareholder equity.
He's not really privy to that kind of information, Shantanu. Honestly, what you're saying is sound, but practically, if you get a job offer, are you going to have access to that kind of information? Where you say, show me your revenue projections for the next 2 years. No one's going to give that to you. What would be some practical ways?
So I think that for employees, there is obviously some sort of a problem in terms of getting some of this report, but past track record of performance, even for unlisted companies, are available on the net today. That's one. But then if I look at other information or different public websites where the existing employees put up their views, their information about the company's insider views, I think some of these could possibly give me some idea about the company that I'm getting.
All right. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on a very important story that we'll be tracking right here on the India Development Debate. Thank you.